Today on Go Island, it's all about movies with Film Buff Video.
Coming up in the next 30 minutes, Salt Spring Island restaurants are closing their doors. Are Todd and Derek up for another challenge in Clocked? And the latest from the Nanaimo Theatre Group. That and more today on Go.
According to Clint Thornley from Film Buff Video, now is the perfect storm for movie releases, whether that be DVD, pay-per-view, or video on demand. We're going to find out why all of the critical acclaimed movies, the independents, the Oscar releases, and I'm really not the one to talk about it. We're going to talk to Clint later on this edition of Go Island. There have been a string of restaurants closing on Salt Spring Island recently. Is it trend or is it just transition? Here is Sucheta Singh. You are watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4, and we're going to start bringing Clint Thornley from Film Buff Video onto Go Island on a regular basis because he is an endless source of film information, opinions, and insight into the film industry. It's the perfect storm for releases right now?
This is the time between February and April when everything comes together to make for a great new release wall choice.
Why?
So, well, we have, first off, the box office big hits that were released at Christmas time, such as The Hobbit. We have movies that were all up for Oscar Best Picture categories like Life of Pi, Lincoln, The Master, Zero Dark 30. There's just a whole host of choices of great quality films. There's a lot of independent films that were also vying for critics' attention back in Sundance. So we're seeing a plethora of choice from not only the box office big commercial hits from Christmas time, but also the contenders that were vying for Academy Gold.
And a lot of the things you can get on DVD now, or pay-per-view or video on demand, are ones that you would never have an opportunity to see in the theater, is that right?
Some of the movies that we get now on DVD are not available at the theaters in Nanaimo because the scope of the film is not big enough for a general audience. They're too specific, they're foreign films, or they're too arty, or movies like that. They become part of the Fringe Festival. So
you really know the film community here in Nanaimo. What's it like? Is there a demand for these arty films that the theaters think that there isn't?
Well, the college has only got bigger since I've lived in this town, and there's more and more collegiate types that do want to see these kind of films. So the Fringe Flick Festival, they do fairly well, and a lot of people will come back and tell me about films that I've already seen before that they've just seen for their first time. So they do make a tour through town, so we do get some opportunities to see them. But whenever they do come to town, it's time to see them as soon as possible because they may only last in the theater for about a week or so. The Iranian film that won Oscar Best Foreign Picture last year, A Separation, it played here in town, but it only played for a week or so. And when I went to see it, I was the only one that was in the theater.
Wow.
So,
and you have it here at your store?
I sure do.
Okay, we're going to come back and talk about independent films and look at a couple of specific examples and a new trend that Clint has noticed in the independents this year. We're going to throw things over now to the dynamic duo Todd Jones and Derek Johnstone. It's another edition of Clocked. Will I stump him this time? I don't know. You're watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4. This is Clint Thornley with Film Buff Video in Nanaimo. There's a lot of shelf space taken up with Oscars that are now released on DVD, pay-per-view, and video on demand. I have to throw that in there. This is Shaw after all. But there's a lot of stuff on here that maybe wasn't acknowledged over the Oscars, the independent films that you've been very impressed with.
There's 3 films that came out this year that all have to do with physical disabilities. 2 of them are French and one of them is an American film. The first one that I'd like to mention is the Rust and Bone film, and this has Marianne Cotillard, who also played Edith Piaf in a previous film, and it also has Matthias Schoenaerts in this film, who played in an Oscar-nominated foreign film called Bullhead.
And what is the disability in that one?
Well, she loses her legs below her knees. She's a orca whale trainer, and she has a horrific accident, and she comes to rely on a guy who was once a bouncer who saved her one time, and he is now a back alley boxer, and she's fixing his fights for him. So it's a very unconventional love story, but it's handled in a very mature way and has a very original storyline. And the other one is another French film called The Untouchables, and this is the highest grossing foreign language film of all time. And it was a real hit on the festival circuit because it's an uplifting movie and it's based on a true story. And it's about a quadriplegic lawyer that relies on a social worker that's not exactly qualified. He's a bit of a petty criminal. And one of his friends advises him not to use him as a social worker because he won't show any pity. That's exactly why I hired him. He does not want to be pitied anymore. And he shows him the joy of life again by doing spontaneous and fun things to do.
And you mentioned that it sort of shows that maybe the foreign audiences are a little bit more mature than the ones here, if we're getting more of these type of films coming out.
They handle the subject matter very well, but in the case of this movie here, The Sessions with Helen Hunt and John Hawkes, of course, came to prominence in the independent film Winter's Bone, which launched the career of Jennifer Lawrence, and that was kind of a movie version of Breaking Bad in terms of a storyline about meth producers in the Ozarks. But John Hawkes gave a terrific performance in this, and this is an American film that has a very mature sensibility on how they handle the subject matter. And
it was quirky. I found it a little bit quirky.
It is a little bit quirky, but because there is humor involved with
I'm throwing you off now. Throwing you off.
With William H. Macy's character being the priest, he looked like he walked off the set of Shameless, his TV show. And so there was some humor between the conversations between John Hawkes' character, who is a polio victim who lives in an iron lung, and consulting with his preacher about whether he should have a sex surrogate that comes to visit him as he's a 37-year-old virgin. Now, Helen Hunt plays the sex surrogate, and she does it in a very mature and bold way, and it's a daring career move for her, but hats off to her because she gave an absolutely wonderful performance. So all three of those films handle sensitive subject material, but they do it in a mature and humanistic way that allows you to sympathize with the characters, but your enjoyment comes out of the quality of the story.
And our audiences here in Nanaimo wanting these types of films?
They love them when they see them. Everyone's come back from watching The Sessions saying they thought it was a terrific film. This movie here, Robot and Frank, had a good original story as well, starring Frank Langella and Susan Sarandon and Liv Tyler and James Marsden. And he's an Alzheimer's patient, pretty much, and it's set about 10 years in the future. His son buys him this robot that is a domestic care worker who makes sure he eats the right foods and looks after his house, which of course he shows resentment for. But we forgot to realize that he was actually a cat burglar at one time, and he teaches the robot how to pick locks. And so it's actually a cute and quirky original story.
It's dawning on me that, you know, the maturity of the handling of the content of the films that you're mentioning are actually being portrayed by quite mature actors. These actors are established, they're well respected, they don't need to have that make or break in their career, and they can choose the roles now that engage them personally.
Exactly. They can be attracted to the story based on the quality of the story, and they can pick and choose their roles. So someone like Helen Hunt in The Sessions, I think, has rebirthed her own career by showing that she's willing to do what it takes in order to make a good story. And so even though she's displayed nude in the film, she does it in such a way that is classy and respectful, and you have to show admiration for her bravado.
Her guts.
Yeah, her guts.
Bravery. Okay, last one.
This is another one here called Smashed, and this is about two alcoholics that are married, and one wants to quit and get her life together, and the other one wants to keep the party rolling. Mary Elizabeth Winstead stars in this film, and it was a Grand Jury Prize winner at the Sundance Film Festival. It's a little bit on the bleak and dark side in the way that Days of Wine and Roses with Lee Remick and Jack Lemmon was, but it deals with the serious subject of alcoholism and you know, trying to get your life back on track.
I don't know how he keeps that all in his head, but we're going to get some more out of it later on this edition of Go Island, moving from performance for film to performance on stage, looking at a play, La Belle Soeur, that looks at women in the 1960s on the verge of the feminist movement in Montreal. They're all gathering around for a game of stamps, and life comes out.
Still ahead today on Go Island, on the brink of the women's movement, La Belle Soeur on stage in Nanaimo and living a dream in Cowichan Bay. That and more still ahead today on Go.
Today on Go Island, we are talking films with Clint Thornley from Film Buff Video. We've talked about some of the independents and a little bit of a trend that Clint has noticed in there. But I think variety is huge. You can't really say this type of movie is the most popular this year, judging by your new releases shelf here.
There's a lot of variety that's out right now, whether it's the commercially successful film The Hobbit, you know, on the Lord of the Rings franchise, or whether you have a family film that was surprisingly good like Here Comes the Boom, or a gangster comedy like Seven Psychopaths. None of these were on the Academy's radar for obvious reasons, but they're enjoyable and entertaining films, and This Is 40 is probably the best comedy that's on the market currently.
I disagree. I saw This Is 40 last week, and I was quite frankly bored.
And this is exactly why comedy is a really difficult genre to recommend, because it's a very personal taste. You never know what will make anybody laugh in any particular film. I thought it was hilarious. Other people sitting beside me might not find it as funny, but yet we're watching the same movie.
I'm kind of living that life, and I can't laugh at it, but you can, because you're going to look at those crazy, silly whatevers, and anyway, too close to home.
I enjoyed the characters. I thought it was funny, and I thought for a comedy they didn't give short shrift to the character development, which they tend to do. They tend to overlook that aspect in the story writing, and I thought these characters were surprisingly believable for what was the template for a comedic film.
Okay, what's this one, Hyde Park?
Hyde Park on the Hudson is a new film that came out this week, and it has Bill Murray playing FDR, as we know was a polio victim, and he is being carried from the seat of power into the seat of his car to go on trysts with his long-distance cousin at the onset of the royal couple coming to visit them to strike up an alliance against Hitler in World War II.
Not a comedy.
It's more lighthearted than you think it would be for the subject matter involved, but for a biography, it's a little bit weak. They only focus in on a slice of life within the scope of FDR's life, and I thought Bill Murray did a good job, and I enjoyed it. It didn't get greatest critical notices, and then of course you have an Academy Award-winning or nominated musical about a guy named Les who's really sad, and this film is very well shot, very well filmed, and I thought the singing was better than, say, Moulin Rouge or Mamma Mia.
Would you recommend it? Because I have no desire to see it for some reason.
I'd recommend it if you're a girl or you're a guy who's not attracted to girls. But it is a musical, and you have to go into it knowing that. But it is a very well-filmed version of that movie, and if you remember, there's about 5 or 6 different versions since the 1920s made on this particular Victor Hugo classic. So that's been done before. But we see a lot of variety, and this is another good film that I'd like to point out. This is a coming-of-age teen adolescent story with an up-and-coming actor in Ezra Miller, who played Kevin, and we need to talk about Kevin.
You said he's a guy to watch.
He's one to watch. He's an actor that's going to be very big in the future. I think he's tremendously talented. But the problem with this film is that even though it is a coming-of-age story, it drags you over very familiar territory with the geeks and the nerds and the jocks that we see throughout high school. And but this is, I think, a bar-setting version of that particular type of story. So it is an excellent version of it.
Thanks, Clint. We are feeling like we're just getting warmed up, but we've come almost to the end of this edition of Go Island. Time for one more story. It's a good news story. Here's Dan Kahn. That brings us to the end of this edition of Go Island. Just a reminder that Clint has a show on CHLY Radio 101.7. It airs every Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. and it's called, can you guess it, Film Buff Radio. We also want to acknowledge Roger Ebert, making a great contribution to film, is no longer with us. On the positive note, I think Clint is trying to step up and fill those shoes a little bit now that Roger's not here. Thanks for watching this edition of Go Island. We'll see you next time.